I recently watched a Jubilee video, which was neurodivergent versus neurotypical, and I wanted to just talk about this briefly because I'll direct you to the video, but there are 2 points in it as well, which I have thought a lot about. One was a point where the guy who was on American Idol, and an autistic person, said like all of the deficits of human connection they feel and long for are channeled into the creative process for them. So they write these songs and perform them, and that's what they do all the time. And there is an ache for human connection, but that the music, the stimming of the music, is the thing that fulfills them, and in lieu or instead of the human connection that they crave. So that's the first thing. And the other thing was, on the topic of diagnosis and labelling, the mother of the autistic girl, I can't remember what her name was talking about how the sort of trends on social media now, where people who are like highly functioning and have like, you know, probably a bit like I would be in danger of, being highly functioning and definitely having some kind of like neurodivergence of not being a sort of normie person, but also like, you know, there's no reason that we would really ultimately need speech therapy or like guidance with interacting with others, because we've either like learned how to do that or have masked well enough for long enough that it's just become second nature to be able to like pass as a kind of normal person. Yeah, she was just quite like rightly pointing out that, you know, there is a sort of trend on social media, especially as well with autism, ADHD. I've even seen the term ADHD, of people who probably like are really relatively highly functioning and don't really need that label of trying to sort of self-diagnose or pose as you know, neurodivergent. So yeah, it's just something, I guess the reason those two things have resonated with me in relation to myself as a whole person, as a creative person, as a human being on this earth in 2024, are because I think the last couple of years, like particularly, and particularly the last 18 months since I left my full-time job, I've had this like realisation that, okay, there are so many things that I do that are actually coping mechanisms, actually, you know, they're compulsive, they're impulsive, they are not conscious, they're not deliberate, they're kind of weird. I have much more like movement and tics than I have ever kind of let show, partly because I was in, you know, like I can't sit still, like I can't actually sit still and be like in a lecture or in a classroom or something. Like when I was lecturing, I'd be like pacing around, like moving my arms a lot, and sat cross-legged or whatever, and also always humming, always wanting to play an instrument, always wanting to drum or tap, and always having this like really horrible extent of songs and melodies just like in my head, repeating in a sort of stuck record way, in a quite painful, irritating way. And that's why I make music, because they just get in my head in a really painful way and I feel really overloaded. But then the only soothing remedy to that is to actually like make the music. And where is the line between like creative genius or like a general genius and you know, being in a divergent state? Creativity in its essence is thinking outside the box, having different expressions, thinking of things that are new. And how much of our creative expressive practices are actually like self-soothing gestures, self-soothing coping mechanisms, because ultimately I feel very like, now I understand myself more. I'm like, oh yeah, I've always needed to like move and shake and like run around and hit things and drum things and tap things and sing things and draw things. It's like, that's not something that everyone feels. And where does that err over into okay, this is art therapy that makes me feel good. This is a skill, this is gifted and talented, or this is just like my way, modus operandi, my way of like regulating myself, just like a normal person, whatever a normal person is, wherever they are on the spectrum. A normal person might like go for a walk, or take a sip of water, or like, you know, leave their desk and take 5 minutes to sort of whatever, like send a voice note or look at something. I don't know how helpful this distinction is for people between in terms of neurodivergence, but I do know that it's something that I am thinking about, and it helps me perhaps just understand myself as someone who has suppressed lots of parts of myself in certain spaces and parts of my expression. And I don't know whether that's masking, I don't know whether that's like all the things that I'm doing, you know, all the time in terms of like the musical stuff, the rocking, the walking around, the pacing around, the fidgeting. I don't know if we can label that stimming. I don't know if it's just part of who I am, but I'm pretty happy right now to just like embrace the fact that I am just who I am. I manage to function in a way that is sort of socially acceptable and enables me to work and things. So what would the benefit of a label offer, other than my own sort of reassurance or validation that, okay, yeah, I know that there's something going on that makes me feel different or weird in a space where like ableist sort of, you know, norms of being are oppressive, right? And maybe what we can be doing as people who are, whatever is like, I don't want to say let the freak flag fly, but let the freak flag fly, just kind of like being more normalizing like unconventional forms of movement and expression, because ultimately like some of us just need to do that more and might need to like express in ways that aren't seen as normal or socially acceptable, and that should be okay. Yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to say is the degree of sensitivity and overwhelm can be really high. I love the term neuromagical or neurospicy, and also I recognise that there's lots of ways in which I have like suppressed. There's sensitivities and intuitions and things that I feel that aren't maybe aligned with rational processes, and that I wonder how that kind of intelligence can be brought forward, because I don't feel like I've figured it out yet in terms of my own sense of where I start and end, what I feel, how it makes sense in terms of decision making or communication. Because I'm always in this sort of like feeling people pleasing mode of like, well, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm doing something wrong, rather than, yeah, just honouring the fact that this isn't okay, this should be, let's do this differently, let's be direct, let's say that, I actually have, you know, I can't be in this room, in this talk, because the volume is wrong, like there's too much background noise and I can't hear, and you need to make this more accessible, and we need to not sit on these bullshit chairs that don't allow me to sink in and concentrate and listen in a way that's going to make sense to me. So I think we can all be inventing and making it up as we go along, and hopefully we are all evolving a more inclusive world that's kinder and more understanding of difference, and that there aren't such rigid ways of moving, behaving and interacting that we were perhaps used to, and that we're perhaps conditioned into when we were educated, wherever that was, whoever you are, whatever age you are. It will be different for everyone, but we are seeing a positive trend, I think, but hopefully not erring, like as alluded to earlier, into sort of performative self-diagnosis that is not helpful to people with genuine disabilities and needs that need sort of extra attention or discernment because they are, you know, visibly oppressed or discriminated against. Yes, that's it, and I'd love a little bit of like interaction below if any of this affects you, because it's been on my mind. I talk about it with some close sort of people who also experience some of these questions and feelings about feeling like different or weird but not knowing how, and maybe being a bit in between labels or whatever. But yeah, I would really appreciate that, and I always appreciate like learning and being pointed in the direction of things to help me understand anything if I've like said anything offensive, which was not any intention, and I hope that that is not the case. Lots of love from me.